I think that fear will stop you from dying, but I think that love is what keeps us alive.
Rotimi Merriman-Johnson, also known as Mr MoneyJar, is an accomplished financial expert, award-winning content creator, and founder of Mr MoneyJar Limited. He's been featured in the BBC, the Financial Times, ITV News, you name it. He's on your screens, he's in your papers, talking about numbers. He's also an ambassador at National Numeracy.
I used to get teased at school a lot as well for being too brainy, is what they called me. I don't know what that means, but fair enough. I've gone back through history. I've gone back through at least the last 500 years to be like, okay, so we've had a pandemic. Why did that even happen? You know, when the pandemic happened, I wasn't surprised at all. And I do worry, actually, that what we're doing in the present day is we're denying the fact that we need each other, and we're outsourcing things that people have done for each other for centuries. We're outsourcing that to things like technology and money. And I think things are being lost because of that. But now we live in a world where we spend hours and hours of our life on social media. Most people who meet romantically meet via dating apps. I don't think it's good at all.
Did you ever think that journey that you started when you started Mr MoneyJar in 2019 will take you to where you are now?
Absolutely not.
How are you doing, sir?
I'm a very good shopper. Thank you for hitting me with the Rotimi as well. That was a recent.
You know what? Yeah, I was curious.
Yeah.
That for me has been a transition. I know you usually run with Timmy, and then you switched to Rotimi last year. Like, what happened?
So my full name is Oluwa Rotimi, and I've been called Timmy my whole life. And when I turned 30, I turned 35 this year, I wanted to change it to Rotimi, at the very least for professional reasons. Because some people think my name's Timothy. People actually have difficulty spelling Timmy as well, even though it's just Timi.
What?
So yeah, I've had a number of different spellings. So I wanted to go with a name that was more overtly Yoruba and kind of let people know my heritage. I was supposed to do it when I turned 30 and I bailed. But I did it this year. A lot of people call me Rotimi. Like a lot of family already call me that. So for a lot of people, there's no change at all.
Yeah. What was the difference between the 30-year-old Timmy and the 35-year-old Rotimi that gave you the courage, let's say, to do it now and you couldn't do it before?
I didn't think I was worthy of doing it 5 years ago. I know that that's quite a big thing to say, but I didn't feel like I'd done enough, which is crazy, right? It's my name. But now, having done everything I've done over the last 5 years, I felt like I had a right to do it. I'm not saying that I agree with that, but that's the truth of the matter.
Wow. It's a powerful way to want to start this conversation, but to look at life and worthiness of the name. Obviously, mine is Shopware, and it's been a name that I have battled with personally, internally, but also battled with so many people over the years. And when I stepped into that name, I stepped into a whole different sphere of just looking at life. It's interesting to hear you say that you didn't feel like you were worthy, and now you feel good. I'm curious, from your perspective, what does, I guess, worthiness and what does that name even mean to you? Why was it so important for you to make that change?
So the name is a Yoruba name. It means God stays with me. And in terms of the worthiness piece, I think that there are a few things going on there. We live in a capitalistic society where I think as men, we are often judged by our ability to acquire resources, make money, our economic value. And that was a narrative that I bought into quite a lot when I was a bit younger, when I was in my 20s. So in terms of worthiness, up until the last few years of my life, worthiness was earning a lot of money, having a lot of wealth, and being seen to be successful in the in the traditional sense of the word. My definition of worthiness has changed now. I think that I'm enough intrinsically now, and I've actually reoriented my goals in life as well. They aren't purely economic anymore. My goal in life now is to be a good son, brother, friend, and hopefully one day husband and dad.
Wow, that's a powerful framing. I think it's interesting hearing someone who specializes in finance talking about actually the economic side of things is not what makes me feel successful, make me feel worthy. I think people naturally expect, like, of course, like it's all about the money. And you're like, no, that's not it. There's more things to life than just that makes you feel grounded, makes you feel whole. It's kind of what I'm hearing from you.
And don't get me wrong, this new framing doesn't mean that I won't go on to make money. I do still have financial goals, but I think we have to remember that if you prioritize whatever you prioritize in life, I believe you will get. So I'll make money so that I can be a good son and, help my mom out with stuff, so that I can be a good parent and provide for my children and for my family. But I think that if money is a priority, then you may well end up incredibly wealthy, but then your wife might leave you, or your children might get to a certain age and be like, yeah, we don't really know our dad because he's just working all the time. So it's just about what takes the focal point and then what feeds into that focal point. Maybe this definition will change. I don't have children, so it'd be great to hear what you think about this definition. I don't have children, so maybe my priorities will then shift or evolve again at that point in time. But I think now, if I just spent the rest of my life being a good son, brother, friend, partner, etc., I don't think I'd look back on my life and regret anything, because I think human relationships are all we have, really.
I think there's enough evidence out there. The typical one where people talk about on the deathbed, no one ever remembers how much money you have or where you've worked. It's always around, the regrets is always around the people that you didn't spend time with. And this for me, especially, like I said, I speak from a father perspective. I know with my kids, they enjoy the trappings of money. Don't get me wrong. They enjoy that for sure. But it's like on Wednesdays, for example, I take my daughter to school, and she has a musicals on in the car, and it's been called Musical Wednesdays for the last couple of years. She enjoys that. She looks forward to that. It's the small little things that you get to do with each other and experiences they get to have with each other that they definitely remember. So, and it evolves. You evolve as a man. You will evolve as a father, husband, all the different elements and stuff like that. But it sounds like you have a good grounding and foundation, and that's what's always key and important to kind of land in.
Yeah.
And I'm curious about you and your journey. And I want to go back, even further back, or further way back then, before you started designing, before you started working in data and research, which is an element of you that most people don't know. And go back to younger you. What were you like in your early years, your first 10 years?
That's a great question. I grew up in South London. So I grew up in Clapham, and I would say I was a fairly normal kid. I have two brothers, but the one that's immediately below me is 3.5 years younger than me. So when I think back to being a child, it's the normal stuff. It's watching wrestling, WCW wrestling on Channel 5 and Robot Wars, and Saturday evening TV, watching Blind Date and Gladiators and stuff. I really liked reading. I really liked school. I really liked video games. They remain a really important part of my life to this day, actually. Me and my brother have really fond memories of playing Super Nintendo together, because our area wasn't that great and we didn't have a garden. So a lot of our time was actually spent playing inside. And our dad would be like, yeah, you can't play with the street kids. You're not allowed to do that. So there was a lot of inside activities. And strangely, I've always been attracted to money stuff from very young as well. I've said elsewhere that I found a diary of mine dated 2000 where I was recording my pocket money and how much money I was spending, and almost like an accountant. But I didn't know what accounting was. I was just doing it. It just no one taught me how to do it. It just naturally occurred to me to do that. So that's what my first 10 years were like. Then I would say the next 20, so teenager and being in my 20s, I would say I lost myself a little bit. You change quite a bit in your adolescence and in your early adulthood, and you try different things and you copy people and you copy stuff. And I would say that the decade of my life that I'm in now, I'm actually trying to get back to what I was like as a child, because I think if you can do that, you get a bit closer to who you actually are before the world, kicks you in the balls and says you can't do stuff or shouldn't do stuff. And you get a bit closer to what your true passions are. I'm quite envious of kids because they don't care. They just say what they think and they just do what they want to do. Yeah.
Do you remember what your true passions were then? Apart from the video games and the data, was there an interest, a key interest that you had at this point in time?
I genuinely really liked school and learning, Chopet. When I think back to the first 10 years of my life, I'm either reading or like I used to do a lot of schoolwork outside of school with my mum. There were these, I don't know if they still exist, this series of books called Hayden Richards. And she would practice like my English and my maths with me outside of school. I used to get teased at school a lot as well for being too brainy, is what they called me. I don't know what that means, but fair enough. And I was moved up a year in school. Actually, yeah. So I did year 3 to 6, 1 year younger than everyone else, and then I did year 6 again at a different school.
And did you think about career-wise, like most kids do? Would you have an aspiration at that time of what you wanted to do? Was it research? Was it scientist? Or was it something else? Or you were very much open? It was just, I don't know what the future holds, so I'm just going to run with it.
I really wanted to do psychology. Because I wanted to understand how people thought and how people worked. And unfortunately, I didn't, the unis at the time wanted an A in maths to do psychology, but I did all humanities subjects, so I couldn't do psychology at any of my choices. But I think what that points to is an interest that I have of peering deeper into things. I think there are a lot of things that we do and use in the day-to-day that we actually have no idea how they work. Take, for example, your phone. Your phone has a touchscreen. I don't think many people can honestly say they understand how a touchscreen on a phone works. Or how Bluetooth works, like what's even going on there. You're just sending stuff to someone magically. So I am and have always been the sort of person that would want to find out how stuff actually works at the deepest level. That's what I was interested in, and I've done that with money.
I would say that back in my day, that curiosity that I had, I saw me like taking the VCR apart and trying to put it back together again, because I was always curious as to how things work.
Yeah.
So it was always around people, money, and tech. The 3 things I was always curious about. Like, what is behind people? What is behind money? What is behind how tech is created and built? Was my curiosity. So I can definitely resonate with that. And when I think about your journey, we listen to you talk about you being curious around like psychology. How did that feed into the way that you got into design? And I'm talking about like early, like 2010, when you were still tinkering and doing a lot of like freelance work. Because some of the designs I saw you do way back, there's an element of psychology to them, the way that you craft things and pull things together.
Yeah, you've researched me. Yeah, I've been designing stuff since I was a teenager, and there's a question like how do I know how to make stuff look?
Yeah, how did you bridge both worlds together of something you're interested in, i.e. psychology, or how things come together, and design and pull them together in such a seamless way?
When I design things or when I explain things, I guess I'm trying to appeal to the need that people have to want things to be simple. So what I fundamentally do in my job, and what it took me a long time to realize that I do actually, because for a long time I was like, I'm posting this stuff on the internet, but I'm not quite sure what my USP is or what I'm doing is I take things that are really complicated, where I take disparate pieces of information and then I pull them together in a way that makes them easy to understand for people. And the thing that I get when I speak to people over and over again is I was aware of what compound interest is or investing or, how the tax system works, but I didn't properly understand it until you explained it to me or until I saw your image, your design explaining it. And that's something that I think has been severely lacking in the financial industry. I think there's a lot of presumed knowledge that people are supposed to have, but you really have to start from square one with a lot of money things. So yeah, that's what I tried to do. I tried to simplify. I tried to save people time.
How much of your time in research that you spent and working behind the scenes with the various like financial institutions and investment banks and all that kind of stuff that you did in your career before you created Mr MoneyJar has influenced the way that you speak and the way that you break things down to people?
Completely. I would say that my first job out of uni, which was at a financial PR company, was almost like training for what it is I'm doing now. All the jobs I've done up to this point are have informed what I do now. So when I was in that first job, I would frequently be on the ONS. I would do consumer research surveys. I'd be looking at government sources, information that was out there. And then you had to put it together in what's called a press release. So this is almost like not quite a document. How do you describe a press release? It's almost like an article. Yeah. An article that a organization or an individual will put together, and then they will send it to newspapers or TV shows or radio shows. And then those publications would then use the information you sent them in their news stories for the day. So it was, again, all about taking different bits of information and then compressing them down into a way that could make them useful to someone. And there are techniques that you learn to make the sharing of information impactful. So I use scale and context a lot. For example, do you remember the 22 billion pound black hole that was discussed? Yeah, so I noticed that a lot of people were really worried about that. And so I did a tweet where I was just like, 22 billion pounds is a lot of money in absolute terms, but the government spends £1 trillion a year. So that's actually 1.8%. Well, 1.2 trillion pounds a year. So that's 1.8% of their budget. And therefore it's not a black hole at all. And there's just loads of people like, okay, wow, I hadn't thought about that number in that way. I can do that with 100 different things.
I am curious, how does your brain retain the level of information and then able to translate? Because typically speaking, especially people, chartered accountant here, background, I've worked with a lot of people and it's typical boring finance. Like trying to make numbers come alive, trying to make things and put into context was literally half of my job with people, and storytelling in a way that met them where they were. How do you do that in such a seamless way? Just listening to you talk about that, I was like, actually, if we put it into context, it's obvious. To you, it seems obvious. To other people, they were panicking.
Yeah. How does my brain work? I see numbers everywhere. I don't know how else to explain it. I see numbers everywhere. I see data everywhere. I know. I'm told quite a bit that not everyone thinks like that, but that's just if I hear a number, then I immediately go, okay, what's the bigger number surrounding that number that's being given to me, particularly when it's coming from the news, because the news is a product, that's designed to get us to think or behave in a certain way. So I will always try to contextualize. I do it with again, it's that thing we were talking about of just trying to understand fundamentally what's happening or how things work. So I do it with finance, I do it with maths, I do it with history. A big part of me trying to understand myself and my place in the world and why what's going on in the world is happening now. I've gone back through history. I've gone back through at least the last 500 years to be like, okay. So we've had a pandemic. Like, why did that even happen? When the pandemic happened, I wasn't surprised at all.
Why?
Because several years ago, I'd seen a TED talk by Bill Gates saying,
I remember that.
we have global pandemics every 100 years, and a reference epidemic that he was talking about at the time was Ebola, and he said that whilst Ebola was very dangerous, it wasn't as transmissible, and by the time you had it in your system, you were really sick, so it was less likely for you to pass it on to people, and that the next biggest risk facing humanity was not a world war, but was a global pandemic, and that the last one we had was at the start of the 20th century. But now we've got planes and stuff. A virus could get around the world in a matter of weeks or even days. And he literally did that TED talk, and everyone gave him a standing ovation and said, great talk, and then just went back to what they were doing. But by the time 2020 rolled around, I'd been expecting that to happen. There were people that had been expecting it to happen. And I remember I was working at an office at the time, and it was March 2020. And I told everyone to go and do a big shop because I could see the virus spreading all over the world. I could see people panic buying. That's what we called it, right? I saw photos of people in Australia just buying reams and reams of toilet paper. And everyone laughed at me. Like, no, it's going to be fine. I was like, fine. I did my big shop. Guess who was wiping their bum with toilet paper 2 weeks later? Not them. Yeah, so it's a combination of how my brain works. Okay, here's a practical tip. You will probably become an expert in a handful of things, but there are more things in the world to learn than there are hours in a day to learn them. And so you need to create a group of experts around you that know more than you in particular fields. And they can be people that you know, or they can be world-renowned experts. And these are people that day in, day out study stuff that you just won't have the time to study. And I have people that if I want to find out about a thing, I'll either read from their blog, or I'll listen to their TED talk, or I'll read a book of theirs. And if you can find the time to read a book, actually, you can become more expert than a lot of people on that topic. So yeah, that's just something I seek to do. And I feel that we live in the information age at the moment. Because of the internet, you can transmit information to anywhere in the world, really, at the speed of light. And so information is a currency now. If you don't know something, people can use that to oppress you, to charge you money, to pull the wool over your eyes. So knowing things actually makes me feel safe.
Where does courage come into that mix? And the reason why I use the word courage is, for example, you said very, very strongly, pandemic is coming, go and do your shopping, people ignored you. You are someone in that period of time double down on your content creation, and you're doing your weekly Insta lives at that point in time. You're putting out your graphics at that point in time. I remember we had a conversation and you're like, I'm not sure where this is going to lead, but I just feel like I need to do this. And that's what kind of we're talking about. I was like, yeah, go for it. 100% makes perfect sense how you're displaying stuff. So there's an element of courage that also goes with having that information, because not every time, the times when people get shut down and like, I'll be shut down. All right, cool. That's not the right thing for me to do. So how does that work for you? Do you think about that side of things as well?
Courage. Do I think what I do takes courage?
Yeah.
Um, no, I think I'm just doing what comes to me naturally. Even if I was to become, win the lottery, I think I'd still be doing what I'm doing now, perhaps just at a bigger scale. But I think fundamentally, I'm a teacher. I like learning things, and then I like explaining it to people.
Did you ever think that that journey that you started when you started Mr MoneyJar in 2019 will take you to where you are now?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. This year, I have been to the House of Commons twice. I have been to the Bank of England a number of times. I have been to Downing Street to meet the Chancellor. I have appeared on national news. If you Google my surname on the internet, it's just loads of articles and things that I've been in. I had no idea that this would happen. But as I said, because we live in the information age, that we just need to be able to think about where things are likely to go. If we live in a world with the internet and social media, that means that there's an opportunity there. And the opportunity is that, and there are more phones than people in the world now, which is kind of terrifying. That means that most people are walking around with a tiny television in their pocket that can connect to the internet. So there is clearly an opportunity for people who are funny, who have a talent, who are informative, educational, controversial, sexy, whatever your thing is. If you're willing to record yourself and then publish your thoughts or your talent or whatever it is on the internet, then if enough people want to see what you're doing, then you can probably make a living off of that. And there were people doing that to some degree when I got started in 2019, but that's hugely exploded now with video content and stuff. So I didn't know exactly where it would take me, but I think the trends were there to see 5 years ago. And it's not just me who does this. There are dozens of financial content creators, brilliant content creators, and there's lots of different, you can create in multiple different industries as well. And they all saw that too, I think. I think we're all futurists to a certain degree. And then looking forwards, you can look at what the social media websites are investing in. There was the first stage of social media, which was to pull us from the desktop computer onto our mobile phones. Because as I said, it's a way more powerful thing for a company if everyone has a computer in their pocket rather than has to go to a desk and sit down at one. And if you look at what they're all investing in now, it's actually going to be to pull us into the device. So they're all investing in virtual reality and augmented reality headsets. And I've used one of them. And the future of social media is you're going to put a thing on and then you're just going to be in a different place, and all digital representations of all your friends are going to be running around. I've been there. Like I've been in the metaverse. I understand what they're trying to do. I actually accidentally went into someone's living room. There's a cinema app, and you put it on, and then there's like public rooms, and then you click on it, and then they're there like watching a film, sitting on a digital couch, and then they like looked at me, and I looked at them. I was like, sorry, and then I left. So in virtual reality space, there's an infinite number infinite number of places you could be. You could be anywhere at any time. So that's the next iteration of everything we're doing.
Is that a future iteration that excites you, or do you still recognize that actually there's an importance to having the in-person meetups?
Yeah, it doesn't excite me at all. I don't think it's a direction that humanity should be going in. What we need to recognize is that when it comes to history, things can actually go left for a really long time before people realize that, hey, this isn't a good thing that we're doing and maybe we should stop doing it. A random example that comes to mind for me is the practice of foot binding in China, which I think took place for like 1,000 years or something before it was outlawed. So human beings have a track record for doing things that we know aren't good for us, but hey, it makes money or it's fun or whatever, so let's keep doing it.
What is foot binding?
Foot binding was a practice in China where they would bind women's feet so that they literally, they would look like claws almost, because small feet were deemed attractive. And it would like break the arch of the foot. So it almost looked like a high heeled shoe. You can Google photos of it. Yeah, they did that for centuries. And there's loads of other examples of things like that. And what we're doing with social media is not good at a human level, because when you look at all the research about what leads to a happy and fulfilling life for human beings, it's like real life human connection. But now we live in a world where we spend hours and hours of our life on social media. Most people who meet romantically meet via dating apps now. It's I don't think it's good at all. But that's where everyone is. So you almost have to. I don't use social media personally. My personal Instagram has no posts, but I recognize that that's where everyone was, and so I took myself onto Instagram.
So if someone listened to it and they were like, yeah, but isn't that a bit rich to say that now? Because you utilized social media to help you blow up. And then because you're now in a position where you don't necessarily need it anymore, you can afford to fall back and not actually utilize it anymore.
No, I mean, I'm here to serve. I'm here to help people. I'm here to serve people. And I am social media agnostic, is what I would say. If they turned off all the social media platforms tomorrow, I would still find a way to help people with their finances. I'm social media agnostic, and I'm also a realist. If we fast forward another 10 years and there are more VR headsets than there are people in the world, and they probably won't be headsets, right? They'll be like glasses.
Yeah.
Yeah. So everyone's got those glasses on. Yeah, then I'll pop the glasses on and I'll just find a way to help people out using the glasses. And I'm here using what I presume will go on social media. I'm using the technology to tell people that I don't think the technology is that great for us.
You talked about earlier on how you are, I guess, looking at things from an individual perspective, looking at life, where you spend time, which makes a lot of sense. But the journey of who you've become over the last 5 years is also what's, I guess, helped you to be able to be in the House of Commons, meet the Prime Minister, and in Bank of England, all these different elements of stuff. And it looks like you are reanalyzing and reprocessing all of that. Is that helpful?
Is what helpful?
Is it helpful to be like, no, the personality, the person, the Timmy or the Timmy at that point in time, the last 5 years is what helped me get here. And now I'm going back into this, I guess, a different level of evolution of who I am. Do you ever get worried like this is not necessarily going to resonate with people, or all those different elements that come with that?
I think I think a good outcome from the internet and social media is that we now have, because we have access to so many people and so many different ways of being, I think authenticity is valued. So I don't think we'll ever get to a stage where people do not value people for being truthful or authentic. And I think that if I demonstrate that I'm just trying to be my best self, I think that will resonate with people. I think that's something that we're all trying to do.
Why is service to people important to you?
Because we need each other. There's a great book by Yuval Noah Harari called Sapiens, and it's a anthropological take on human history and how we've come to be here. And I'm paraphrasing here, but in the book he talks about how when you look at all of the other living beings on Earth, we don't have the sharpest claws or the longest claws or the sharpest teeth, and we're not the biggest or strongest animal, but we are here still because we are able to cooperate with each other. We specialize and we cooperate. That's what human beings do better than no other species on the planet. And it's what's enabled us to get to where we are today, where we're top of the food chain. And we need each other. You know, if we pretend that we're not living in a country with 68 million people in it, and that we're instead on a tropical island with a few hundred people, we would have to cooperate to survive. You'd have the people who'd go out and fish, and you'd have the people who collected the firewood. You'd have the people who made and repaired the clothes. You'd have the people who, told stories and were funny to take people's mind off things and stuff. That kind of system would naturally occur. And I do worry actually that what we're doing in the present day is we're denying the fact that we need each other, and we're outsourcing things that people have done for each other for centuries. We're outsourcing that to things like technology and money. And I think things are being lost because of that.
I think it's, I always say that the pandemic was an interesting period where when you took away people's freedoms to be able to meet each other, they quickly realized how important that human connection was. But then when they got it back, you just went back to living the old ways of, i.e., being a devices and doing all that kind of stuff like that. So it's such a interesting thing of when we take something away, when you don't have that freedom, you can easily take it for granted. But when you have access to it, you don't value it as much.
The pandemic was a huge lesson. You know, we recognized for the first time in my lifetime anyway, that, you know, it was the key workers, the bin people, the doctors, the nurses, the bus drivers, the tube and train drivers. They were the people who actually kept society going. And we gave them their props during that period. But we've forgotten about all of that now. It's amazing how short term our memories are. I really miss that period. Obviously, I wouldn't wish for the pandemic to come back, but I do miss us having to care about the stuff that actually mattered, like being forced to. And I just hope that the next time we do that, it's not under duress. It just comes from a genuine realization that it's other people that are important.
Naturally, when asking someone like you this question, i.e., what's important to you, you would think it's money. Listening to you talk, it sounds like money's on the list, but it's not number one or number two. So I am curious, like, what is it that's important to Rotimi? What is it that makes you come alive the most? And what is it that you're thinking about consistently, should I say?
Yeah, love is very important to me. I think the world is ruled by two forces, fear and love. I think that fear will stop you from dying. But I think that love is what keeps us alive. And I think it's the most powerful force on earth. And people, I think deep down we do all love each other, care about each other. And we need to have more love and trust in the world. I care a lot about being the best version of myself possible. I don't know if you ever, this is something that happens to me. Do you ever think about the fact that you're going to die someday? Do you ever just sit there and realize that, oh, wow, like one day I'm just going to stop existing?
Yeah.
I have that thought every day. And it used to scare me, but it doesn't actually scare me now. It just kind of prompts me to get on with the things I really want to be doing and to say the things I really want to say, because the day will come when you won't have a chance to do or say them anymore. And something that I get, the thing that actually scares me is me dying with my best work still in my head. Whenever I think about that, I'm like, okay, maybe just post the thing so it's out. And I think the third thing I would say, so yeah, love's really important to me. Being my authentic self is really important to me. And the final thing I'll say is important to me is having fun. I think having fun is massively underrated, but I think life needs to be that serious all the time. I feel like the UK is quite a miserable place at the moment, or maybe I just know lots of miserable people. But whenever I turn on the news or go on social media, it does seem pretty miserable, and things aren't perfect. But hey, look, at least we live in a country where it's like relatively safe and stable, and you can just go about your day. There are parts of the world that are just perpetually in war, and people, they go to bed and they don't know if they're going to wake up and their house is still going to be there. So I guess you just need to look at the situation that you have and just make the best of it.
Yeah, which is also where, it's interesting when you talk about love and fear being quite powerful, because then hope also comes into that mix, personally for me, because I'm like, that is something that, even to your last point, keeps people going in dire times, because the UK does feel bad at the moment. It's like everywhere I turn, there's so many people I know. So many people I know who are moving to like Dubai or Ghana or wherever it is, in the search of operating in a different environment and living in a different environment, because they don't want to be around misery anymore. So I definitely hear that, and I'm sure. Have you ever done the eulogy exercise before?
Is this where you write down what you want people to say at your funeral?
Yeah,
Yeah, I did it a while back. Yeah.
it's one of the ones that I found is quite interesting when you start thinking about death. Is like, actually, what is it I want to be able to say that I have done, the legacy I've left behind? And for me, then evolved into this thought, this phrase I utilize a lot, which is like live full and die empty. Like that's the kind of life where I want, where it's like every single gifts and talents and ideas that I had, I just pulled it out. And that's a life lived well, rather than like going to the grave with all those different things inside of you as well.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so important that you do that. And to circle back to what I said at the start of the episode, my eulogy 10 years ago would have been very different to my eulogy now, because I had really grandiose notions of what I wanted to do with my life and what success looked like. So if you'd asked me this question 10 years ago, I'd be like, yeah, I'd want there to be like a Merriman-Johnson street, and I'd want to be on a banknote, and I'd want to be knighted or whatever. But like that was coming from a place of a lack of self-love and a lack of self-acceptance, because I wanted all those things that I thought that once I achieved them, then that would make me a valuable human being. But now, genuinely, and I do genuinely mean this, if at my funeral they say, do you know what, Timmy was a good son, he was always there for me, he was supportive, he was a good brother, he was a good friend, didn't speak to him all the time, but when I did see him, we had a good time, he was a good husband, he was a good dad, I'm good. I feel like if that got said about anyone today, 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 1,000 years in the future, that will be a solid mark to leave on earth. And you don't need to do any huge stuff. What I also now know that I'm slightly older and wiser is that if you want to change the world, you must necessarily start with the world around you. Do you know what I mean? Like, you're trying to change some big national thing, but like, have you even checked in with your friends? You're trying to get a street named after you, but have you even helped people on your street? You know, I think you got to start with the world around you and then work your way out.
Oh, it sounds like you need to start with the world inside of you and then around you and then work your way up. Because when I look at you
That's
talk
true.
about that 10-year gap, a lot's happened. It sounds like inside of you where you're thinking about things and processing things a lot more differently. And it would be great to kind of learn and understand for someone else listening to this, like, how do I go on that journey of, I don't know, let's call it self-love, self-awareness, that reconnection back to what's important to me? How do I go on that journey? And learning from your story, it'd be great to hear how you did that.
Absolutely. Go to therapy. So, you know, whether it's once, twice, whether you go for a year, whatever, pay a professional who doesn't know who you are to ask you questions in a non-judgmental way, and they will guide you through. Good therapists won't tell you the answers. They'll just ask you questions and then you'll come up with the answers as you're speaking. So therapy is very important. I also like to do various quizzes. So your Myers-Briggs personality type is quite a fun one to do. Have you done Myers-Briggs before?
I have.
Yeah. Do you know what your letters are?
If I remember properly, I think I am INFJ, I think.
Yeah, I knew you were IN something because I'm an INTJ. Yeah, so and actually I do oscillate between thinking and feeling as well. So that doesn't surprise me at all about you, Shopper. So Myers-Briggs is good. If you're in a relationship, do the love languages quiz. Find out what your love languages are, both how you like to give and receive love, and do it for your partner as well. Do it for your loved ones. It doesn't just have to be romantic. Do it for the people that you love in your life. I meditate every day. Super, super important in this world that we're living in, but there's just constantly inputs and noise, that you sit in silence and just breathe. And actually, when I meditate, that's when all my best ideas come. So that's an answer to your earlier question where you're like, how does your brain work, etc., etc. I sit in silence every day. It's really important to do that. And I also, I've reconnected. Well, I would say reconnected because I'm still in the culture of doing it. I am reconnecting with my culture and my history so I can understand who I am and where I come from. And that's a journey that I'm on as well. So if you do some combination of all those things, I think that's a great way to start investigating the world inside you.
Where does fitness come into that mix for you? I saw you ran a marathon recently as well for charity, and that is not easy. The training and the hours that go into it, let alone running the actual marathon itself. Someone who's done it, it was tough. So what does fitness lie into that mix for you?
Yeah, fitness is something that's really important to me. But if I'm being honest, I'm not like an exerciser. I need to have a race in place to motivate me to actually go out and exercise. So even though I ran that marathon, I haven't really run since then. So I need to put my next race into the calendar so that I can then be motivated. But I do as I've gotten into my 30s, I've started to do yoga and Pilates every morning, like stretching and mobility exercises, particularly as someone who works from home a lot and does a lot of work sitting down. I just think it's important to move your body in that way. And I think fitness is important, but I wish I prioritized it more. My approach to fitness is very inconsistent. I'll put in a race, I'll run, I'll lose loads of weight. So the first marathon I did was London 2022. And this was at the end of the lockdowns. I'd put on all this lockdown weight. My clothes weren't fitting me. I was like nearly 90 kilograms. And then by the end of that year, I was like 80 kilograms. I'd like lost a bunch of weight in preparation for the marathon. So that's what I'm like. Going forwards, I'm thinking about 2030 a lot. We're halfway through the decade, pretty much. Going forwards, I'd love to be a lot more consistent when it comes to exercise, rather than, extreme.
Sounds like you've got a good metabolism that most people will be envious of as well. If you can switch in and out just like that.
That I can be. So I think maybe, but I can also be. I can like not be doing something, and then I just start doing it, and then it's all I'm doing. So I was going to the gym a lot in preparation for, like, when I have a big race, I'll be going to the gym a lot. Like, anyone who's got me on Strava and stuff will just be like, oh, he's running again. So yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'd like to be more consistent and less choppy and changey with things.
Do you set goals? So you someone is like, okay, 2025, by the end of 2025, I want to have achieved X, Y, Z, or do you look at things differently?
I do set goals. I separate my life into 4 buckets: personal, professional, health, and social. And I will have a goal for each year. So a health goal is normally a big race for that year. A personal goal might be to learn something. A social goal might relate to a romantic partner or something that I'd like to do for someone else that isn't me. So this year it was to take my brothers on holiday, and we did that. That was really fun. Went to Spain. And a professional goal will be a big thing that I want to achieve for my business. And the important thing with goals is that you have very few. When I used to set goals, I'd have like 10 goals for the year. If you have so many goals that you can't list them from memory, then you have too many. Really, ramp them down. Have 3 or 4 maximum. Set a date that you'd like to achieve the goal by, and then see if you can systemize the goal in some way. So the goal of running a marathon becomes less about the race that you do on the day, and it becomes more about the weekly runs you'll be doing in pursuit of that marathon, and put it into your calendar. Same thing is the case with money. If there's an amount of money that you want to spend, know what you want to save, know what you're saving it for, put a date in the future, and divide that amount of money by the number of months between now and that date, and then just set up the standing order, whatever, and just automate it. Few goals, specific date in the future, and systemize them in some way. And there's nothing that I write down as a goal that I don't achieve using this method. That's where all this stuff, nothing. And if you don't achieve it, then just roll it over to the next year. But you can get quite a lot done in the space of a year. Where goals don't happen is when you have like 20 goals, no specific date in the future, and it's not gradual. You haven't put that system in place. Then that drastically reduces the likelihood of the goal happening. When you're operating at the highest level, you might have one goal all year. If you're Usain Bolt, your goal is to run the 100 meters faster than everyone else. And then you spend the rest of the year training for that. And then look at that. Like, one goal can change your life. Like, literally just achieving one thing can be the thing that you're known for forever. So I would keep the list small if you can.
Are there any other mental models, shall I say, that you utilize in your day-to-day?
Yes, I use first principles thinking all the time.
I love that.
Yeah. First principles thinking is incredibly powerful because it enables you to see things from a substance perspective rather than a form perspective. And for people who don't know what first principles thinking is, it's about breaking things down into their core components and viewing them through that lens. So, for example, a person might say, why don't we have flying cars yet? So you break it down. Okay, well, what is a car? Well, a car is a vehicle that you sit in that gets you from from point A to B. And you wear a seatbelt, and there are windows, etc., etc., etc. If you think about it from a first principles perspective, we do have flying cars. They're called planes. We've had them for 100 years. Then the question becomes, how high up should the flying car be? And then you realize, well, if planes flew any closer to the ground, there'd probably be a lot more deaths, and it'll probably be really noisy all the time. So it's probably a good idea that they're tens of thousands of feet in the air. And if you look at, there's another great TED talk by Elon Musk, where he's talking about how if we wanted people to have personal vehicles, it would very likely not be flying cars. We'd have tunnels instead.
Mm-hmm. That's what he's there to do.
Yeah, it's just a lot safer. And you can go further down than you can up. So just things like that. I watched that back when I was a bit more of an Elon Musk fan. I think he's a bit crazy now.
He's a definitely interesting character.
Yeah.
That's a good way to kind of frame him. And let's kind of move towards, the interview was quite interesting in a number of ways. And I said I was like, I want to understand Rotimi a lot better. And I haven't gone there really with the finance stuff. So there's loads of information that you can delve into about Rotimi. He talks about finance all the time. But learning about you and how you're thinking and approaching things, for me, I found really intriguing. And there's two more points I kind of want to land before we wrap up. One, you talked about you're tapping more into your culture, your history, your heritage. What are you learning as you delve more into that?
Yeah. I'm learning that as a Yoruba person, that I'm part of a group of people that have existed for at least a couple thousand years. And that we as Black people have a history that precedes what often comes to the forefront, which is things like the transatlantic slave trading era, or colonization on the continent, or even the last 100 years of migrating to countries like Europe and North America and settling. Like there's a deeper history to who we are and what we do. And I haven't actually said this publicly on the podcast before, but I'll share it here. You know, part of this is the reason why I'm not a Christian. You know, I believe in God, but I wouldn't say that I identify as a Christian, because when you study Yoruba history, there's like a whole different set of traditions that used to be practiced in West Africa before the advent of Christianity in West Africa. And there's little clues here and there as to what that tradition was. I'll give you an example. The name Babatunde. Do you know what that name means?
I do not remember right now, but I'll speak when I would.
Yeah. Babatunde means the father has returned. Yetunde means the mother has returned. The reason why those names are called so is because in Yoruba tradition, they used to believe, well, they still do, believe in reincarnation. So West African tradition was actually a lot closer to Hinduism and Buddhism than Western Judeo-Christian traditions, where you die and then you either go to heaven or hell for eternity. And there's lots of different things that are like, you read it, you're like, that's why our names are that. Or, oh, okay, that's what the etymology of that word is. Or that's where that music comes from. Or that's where that food comes from. That's what I've been connecting with. I believe in God. I believe in God. I particularly believe in God when I look at outer space. I don't know if you're familiar with the James Webb telescope, but it's, when I look at those images, I'm like, okay, there's definitely something out there that is greater than us, that is that is the architect of all of this. But wouldn't say that I have wedded myself to any particular tradition in service of that.
Well, it's always it was always good to be curious and to explore. But even as part of that exploration, if you were to look into even going back to some of the gods, shall I call it, of Yoruba traditions, or the Ogus and all the different elements, and you go way back further than that, you actually see a lot more synergies to not necessarily Western Christianity, but African Christianity. So even that in itself is the interesting one, because that's a lot older than some of the original Oguns if you go to like 11th, 12th, 13th century. But you are a man of data, so this is a conversation I look forward to talking offline a bit more with you as you carry on your exploration and journey.
Yeah. You know what? I may go on this journey, and then I might end up back with Christianity. I was raised Christian. I've been to church for longer in my life than I have not. I may end up back at square one, but what I did was I stripped everything back, which I think has kind of been the theme of this conversation.
First principles.
First principles. I stripped everything back, and I was like, okay, I know nothing. So under the assumption that I know nothing, if I start to investigate, where do I then end up? My hunch when it comes to religion specifically is that actually there is God, and much like language, different religious traditions have developed over time and in different parts of the world, but they are just all different lenses through which to see God, because it'll be pretty crazy for someone to be like, English is the correct language. It's like, well, it's a way of communicating with people, and it has an alphabet A to Z. But in China, they came up with a different way of communicating. And in Russia, they have a Russian alphabet. And you have like dead languages that aren't used anymore. But it's all fundamentally the same thing, which is a way of communicating information. I think that when all is said and done, we'll realize that we were all talking about the same thing, which is the creator of what we see when we look up into outer space.
You are, in a sense, living what the Bible talks about, which is like search for yourself and see what's true, what's not, and come to that conclusion on your own. And I think so many of us, especially growing up in Nigerian households, Christian households, we can easily take off the identity of our parents and what we've been brought up in, rather than having that personal. So you going back to first principles and exploring for yourself, I actually think it's a good thing to be able to. If you get back there, great. But at least you can say you actually gone on that journey and understand what it is that you really believe in and tapping into as well.
Yeah, thanks for understanding.
And my last question to you then would be, how do you define leadership?
I think that leadership is, if I could boil it down to one thing, I think leadership is about making the first move in anything, in any sphere of life. I think this is just the example that's come to me. I think if you're at a networking event and people are being a bit shy, making the decision to go up to someone and strike up a conversation is leadership. If you see a situation that you don't agree with, that you think needs to be called out, being someone who's willing to stick your head above the parapet and be like, oh, do you know what? I don't agree with this. This isn't right, is leadership. I think that if you are in a relationship with someone, it doesn't need to be romantic, it could be a friendship, and perhaps it's been a bit surface level. I think as guys, we can often have surface level relationships with each other where it's like, yeah, how you doing? Yeah, stuff's good. Football, video games, social media, whatever. Actually making the decision to be vulnerable and to show that deeper layer to yourself is also leadership. So I'd say leadership's about making the first move. And there aren't always rewards for doing that. Sometimes you stick your head above the parapet and, someone tries to chop it off. But I still do think it's worth it.
You are someone who, there are so many layers to you, and there's a depth in that layered approach that I think some people get access to, but not a lot. And I'm going to name it, like, just because the Timmy or the Rotimi that you see, and when you're talking about finance and stuff like that, you're sharing that knowledge and people stay in that space. But that next level layer, the way that you think and approach things, even that, very much I like the word you used earlier on around being a futurist. That way of thinking about life and being very, very philosophical. I can see how psychology was important to you when you were younger. But I think it's something that I would love to see more of you doing more and talking more about. Because I think there's so much wisdom in the way that you consume things. There's so much wisdom in the way that you share stories and break things down that people can learn so much more than just the vehicle of finance. That's what got you known, but there's a lot more depth to you. And I appreciate you just coming in here and sharing some of that. But I want to see more of that as well. I'm just letting you know.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for seeing the vision. Going forwards, I want to represent more facets of myself publicly. I think I've got a lot to say, a lot to share, and a lot to teach. And as I said, Chopper, I have been in hiding. I was supposed to, like with my name, 5 years ago, I was supposed to represent my name authentically, and I just didn't do that. But baby steps,
Baby steps. You're doing it.
Maybe you'll see me online talking philosophy one of these days. Who knows?
I have no doubt. I have no doubt. But I see you in that office, that room they have in Cambridge, and when they do the debates.
Cambridge Union.
Cambridge Union, yeah. I see you one of those spaces having those kind of like waxing philosophy one, and I forgot what the room is called that they tend to have those debates. But I see you do one of those, and that'd be amazing. That'd be amazing to see.
Yeah, thank you. Let's manifest it here. Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on Rotimi. This is Everyday Leadership. Every information around Rotimi will be available for you to tap into. But like I say, you just Google his name, you will find lots of stuff about him, especially about the podcast that he has as well, that I would highly recommend. But we'll see you all on next week's episode of Everyday Leadership.